Who is Keshab Prasad Bastila and how is he contributing to Portugal's future? In the heart of Portugal, amidst the bureaucratic hurdles, social injustices, and a community teetering on the edge of despair, one name stands as a symbol of unwavering commitment and resilience: Keshab Prasad Bastila. His dedication has transformed the lives of numerous people in both Portugal and Nepal, showcasing the power of an individual's determination to defend the rights and well-being of marginalized groups, even when faced with significant personal risk. Bastila's relentless advocacy has shed light on the critical challenges confronting the Nepalese migrant community in Portugal, and his courage has been recognized by those whose lives he has positively impacted. Bastila, a businessperson and community leader, has long been a voice for those who have been silenced by bureaucracy, poverty, and exploitation. For years, he has campaigned for the fair treatment of Nepalese migrants in Portugal, tirelessly battling against the web of corruption, inefficiency, and negligence that has ensnared these individuals in an endless cycle of vulnerability. In his recent letters addressed to various governmental bodies, including the President and the Prime Minister of Portugal, he laid bare the many struggles that Nepalese migrants face daily. His writings exposed the deep flaws in the immigration system, which has left countless workers stranded without legal status, without access to essential services, and at the mercy of corrupt officials and criminal organizations. His words were not just criticisms, they were a cry for justice, a plea for reform that could change the lives of thousands. In one powerful letter, he wrote, "Nepali migrants in Portugal contribute significantly to both nations through their hard work and remittances. Yet, they are trapped in a web of corruption, inefficiency, and exploitation. It is incumbent upon both Nepalese and Portuguese governments to take immediate action to address these issues, restore dignity to migrant lives, and uphold the principles of justice and fairness." This impassioned plea did not fall on deaf ears, but it certainly met fierce resistance. Bastila has faced numerous threats to his life and livelihood, yet he has never backed down in his pursuit of justice. His resilience in the face of danger has earned him the respect and admiration of those who have witnessed his unwavering commitment to his cause. Portugal's immigration system is under scrutiny as criminal organizations, or mafias, have gained control over critical immigration services, exploiting vulnerable migrants for financial gain. These mafias manipulate the system by charging exorbitant fees for basic services such as document verification and residence permits, leaving migrants trapped in a cycle of exploitation. He has become a vocal advocate for migrant rights and has highlighted these issues in his letter to the Portuguese government, calling for urgent reforms to protect migrants and dismantle these criminal networks. Bastila's letter outlines how these criminal organizations exploit inefficiencies in Portugal's legal and immigration systems, profiting from migrants who are often desperate to secure their legal status. He reveals how the mafias charge fees that exceed €1,000 per person for services that should be provided by the state. This corrupt practice not only violates human rights, but also exacerbates the financial burden on already struggling migrants. Criminal organizations and mafias are reportedly active in extorting migrants, hoarding money even in legal verification tasks, and charging over €1,000 per person. This is a clear violation of human rights and an abuse of power that must be stopped, writes Bastila. The exploitation is not limited to financial extortion but extends to unsafe living conditions and labor abuse. Many migrants, already struggling to secure legal status, find themselves trapped in substandard housing arrangements, paying exorbitant rent for overcrowded, unhygienic spaces. With corrupt officials turning a blind eye, these unsafe conditions continue unchecked, worsening their struggles. Reports from housing rights organizations indicate that in some of Portugal's most densely populated migrant neighborhoods, over 20 to 25 people share a single room, often paying inflated rents to unscrupulous landlords. Some live in partitioned rooms initially designed for businesses, violating housing laws and posing serious safety risks. Despite multiple reports highlighting these concerns, enforcement remains weak, leaving migrants vulnerable to exploitation. The lack of proper oversight has allowed such practices to flourish, further worsening the struggles faced by undocumented workers in Portugal. At the same time, a concerning financial scheme has emerged where individuals who do not even reside in Portugal are paying excessively high taxes through Portuguese mini-marts, which report far more income than their actual earnings. This is being used as a tactic to launder illegal money by falsely documenting it as income from small businesses. Additionally, illegal work contracts are being sold to undocumented migrants, allowing them to appear as legal employees in businesses where more than 20 people are being forced to work in roles originally meant for only 5 to 10 workers. These exploitative practices not only harm genuine business owners, but also create an underground economy that thrives on financial manipulation and labor exploitation. The consequences extend beyond the migrant community, directly impacting the Portuguese economy. Small businesses are being used to launder money through fake tax filings, burdening legitimate business owners who struggle to compete with fraudulent operations. Additionally, social benefits are being claimed by individuals who do not reside in Portugal, placing an unfair strain on government resources that should be directed to those in genuine need. Despite repeated warnings and appeals, the Portuguese government has yet to take any significant action to address these concerns. No official response has been issued regarding fraudulent documents, overcrowded housing, or illegal work contracts. He has urged authorities to launch an investigation into these issues, but so far, his calls remain unanswered. Bastila stresses the need for a comprehensive overhaul of the immigration process, including a push for transparency and accountability to protect the interests of migrants. The failure to act enables a growing underground network that profits from desperation. Without urgent intervention, these criminal organizations will continue to exploit both the system and the people trapped within it. Portugal's commitment to justice must be reflected in policies that safeguard both migrants and the integrity of national institutions. As the issue continues to gain attention, there is hope that his call for reform will lead to meaningful changes in Portugal's immigration policies. His advocacy shines a spotlight on the exploitation faced by migrants and the urgent need for legal reform to prevent further abuse. The time has come for Portugal to act, not just for the sake of migrants, but to uphold the values of justice and fairness that the country stands for. According to reports, a significant number of Nepali, Indian, Pakistani, and Bangladeshi individuals have allegedly obtained Portuguese residency and citizenship using fake stamps from the Delhi embassy. This loophole has allowed individuals with no basic knowledge of Portuguese laws or language to fraudulently secure citizenship. Bastila has strongly condemned this malpractice, urging the Portuguese government to implement stricter verification measures to prevent such fraudulent activities. Despite evidence of these activities, there has been no official crackdown or government investigation into how widespread this issue has become. He has called for urgent verification measures to prevent further misuse of the system. In relation to that, Bastila strongly advocated for reforms in the process of obtaining SIM cards in Portugal, highlighting how the previous lax system allowed anyone to acquire a SIM without proper verification. This loophole was exploited by perpetrators to issue threats, not only against him but also as a broader tactic to silence others who dared to speak out against corruption and exploitation. Criminal groups used untraceable numbers to send intimidating messages and calls, creating an atmosphere of fear. He repeatedly urged the government to implement stricter verification measures, ensuring that SIM cards could no longer be used as tools for harassment and criminal activities. His persistent efforts led to policy changes, with Portugal now requiring proper identity verification before issuing SIM cards. This measure, aimed at curbing identity fraud and harassment, ensures that phone numbers can no longer be used as untraceable tools for intimidation. He believes this measure will enhance national security and prevent the misuse of mobile networks by those engaging in unlawful practices while advocating for fair immigration policies. He has faced significant personal backlash. His calls for transparency and legal reform have made him a target for criminal networks profiting from fraudulent activities within Portugal's immigration system. In retaliation, organized criminal networks have launched a smear campaign against him and his family. These groups have created fake, defamatory videos filled with false accusations, attempting to tarnish his reputation and discredit his efforts. The videos, spread across social media platforms, like TikTok and Facebook, are part of a broader intimidation tactic designed to silence his advocacy. Bastila has denounced these attempts, emphasizing that such cowardly attacks will not deter him from fighting for justice and transparency. Beyond online defamation, he and his family have also received direct threats from these criminal groups. Intimidating messages, warning him to stop his complaints or face severe consequences, have been sent through various channels. Despite these threats, he remains resolute, urging Portuguese authorities to take action against those responsible. He calls for stronger enforcement against such criminal activities, stressing that no individual should face harassment for demanding fairness and accountability in governance. Not just that, his letters also highlight the immense human cost of deportation policies that are currently in place, focusing on the long-term impact on families, children, and entire communities. In his letter to the Portuguese government, Bastila points out that while deportation may be deemed necessary under certain circumstances, it should never come at the expense of human dignity. His primary concern is the impact on future generations who find themselves torn from their homes and schools without a fault of their own. He writes, "The current deportation practices have long-term consequences for families, particularly children who face the trauma of being uprooted from their homes, education, and community." It is critical that deportation policies take into account the human aspect of these decisions, not simply the administrative processes. He urges that deportation be carried out in a manner that preserves the dignity of individuals, emphasizing that future generations should not suffer from decisions made in haste or without compassion. His message is clear: any deportation measure should ensure the safety, well-being, and future prospects of those affected, especially vulnerable children. Additionally, Bastila calls for a re-evaluation of how such policies are enforced, proposing alternatives that would allow families to remain together and continue contributing to society in a meaningful way. His approach stresses the importance of a compassionate and fair system that looks beyond the legalities to the humanitarian impact, ensuring that the needs of children, who represent the future, are safeguarded. This appeal for ethical deportation comes at a time when there are growing concerns about the treatment of migrant families in Portugal and beyond. His call for compassion and a humane approach to immigration policies is gaining traction, as more people recognize the devastating consequences of inhumane deportation practices. Families live in constant fear and uncertainty, unable to validate their documents or secure employment. Workers earning minimal wages are burdened with additional costs, such as the €250 required for document verification, a sum equivalent to a month's salary for many. He has faced countless hardships in his journey, but his commitment to the cause has never wavered. In one of the more poignant parts of his letter, Bastila wrote, "If my efforts to highlight pressing issues and offer solutions are seen as unwelcome or problematic, then you are free to take whatever action you deem necessary, including penalization of my whole family. If my voice is perceived as a challenge to the current administration, I respect your decision to handle this matter as you see fit." This emotional passage serves as a reminder of the personal sacrifices that advocates like Bastila make in their pursuit of justice. Despite these threats, he has continued to speak out on behalf of those who have no voice, pushing forward with his work to ensure a better future for both the Nepalese and Portuguese people. In his letter to the Portuguese government, he specifically highlighted the plight of Nepalese workers who, despite working diligently and sending remittances back home, are trapped in a system marked by exploitation and systemic corruption. His letter draws attention to the socio-economic difficulties faced by Nepalese migrants, who often work in low-paying jobs without the legal protection they deserve. These workers are caught in a cycle of poverty and vulnerability, with limited access to essential services such as healthcare, housing, and legal support. Despite their critical role in Portugal's economy, these migrants are left to fend for themselves in a hostile and often corrupt system. Nepali migrants contribute significantly to both nations through their hard work and remittances. Yet, they are trapped in a web of corruption, inefficiency, and exploitation. It is incumbent upon both Nepalese and Portuguese governments to take immediate action to address these issues, restore dignity to migrant lives, and uphold the principles of justice and fairness, writes Bastila. Furthermore, he emphasizes the human rights violations that migrants endure, including abuse and mistreatment by employers and government officials. Many Nepalese workers live in constant fear of deportation, unable to access the legal protections they are entitled to. This lack of legal support leaves them vulnerable to exploitation, unable to assert their rights or seek justice. He also advocates for the creation of a fully functional Nepalese embassy in Portugal, decentralizing consular services to make them more accessible. He also urges the government to ensure that migrants are provided with the legal support they need, particularly in securing residence permits and protecting their rights against exploitation. The government must act swiftly to protect the rights of Nepalese migrants. They deserve access to legal services, fair wages, and the same protections afforded to other workers in Portugal, Bastila asserts. As he calls for government action on critical issues such as immigration reform, housing, healthcare, and public services, he does so with a clear understanding of the emotional and personal toll involved. This work is not without its challenges. The threats and sacrifices are real, but my commitment to a better society outweighs them all, he affirms in his letter. Bastila has also raised concerns about the prohibitive fees charged by lawyers for facilitating spousal immigration processes, particularly family reunification. Bastila criticizes the practice of charging high fees for essential services like scheduling appointments, highlighting that such charges, which are not government-mandated, place unnecessary financial burdens on migrants. One of the most pressing issues, according to Bastila, is the impact these fees have on low-wage workers, many of whom are already struggling to make ends meet. The exorbitant fees for family reunification often exceed or match the equivalent of a month's salary, making it nearly impossible for workers to reunite with their loved ones. In his letter, Bastila points out the inherent injustice of this system, noting that these fees are a significant barrier to family unity, especially for those in vulnerable financial positions. Bastila raises a key question: is the Portuguese government indirectly endorsing this exploitation by allowing such practices to continue unchecked? He suggests that the lack of regulation and oversight on these fees may be an unintentional endorsement of an unjust practice that prevents migrant workers from exercising their right to family reunification. How can families be expected to reunite when the process is financially out of reach for many? Bastila asks, challenging the government's stance on the matter. As part of his appeal for change, Bastila urges the government to intervene and reduce these high fees, stressing that such costs are unfair and violate the principles of family unity. He calls for urgent action to address this issue, emphasizing that reducing the financial barriers to family reunification would restore a fundamental right to thousands of migrant workers. Family reunification is a right, not a privilege, Bastila states, underscoring the deep emotional and social significance of reuniting with loved ones. With his appeal, he is not only calling for a reduction in fees, but also for the creation of a fairer, more just immigration process that values human connections over financial gain. By addressing the spousal immigration fee issue, he advocates for a Portugal that truly prioritizes the dignity and rights of all its residents, regardless of their financial background. However, he has also raised concerns about foreign nationals exploiting the system by claiming childbirth social benefits from the Portuguese government while raising their children abroad. This exploitation of public funds, he argues, is unjustifiable and must be immediately curtailed. No one should illegally take social benefits from Portugal when they do not need it, he asserts, urging authorities to implement stricter checks to ensure these benefits are only provided to those who truly reside in the country. Additionally, Portugal's public transportation system has faced criticism from Bastila for inefficiencies, especially in rural areas, where citizens encounter unequal fare structures. Letters have been drafted emphasizing the financial and logistical challenges it imposes on rural workers who rely on public transport for their daily commutes. Bastila points out that the current pricing structure disproportionately impacts rural communities, further hindering low-income individuals' access to reliable transportation. He argues that this inequity creates further division between urban and rural populations, limiting mobility and access to vital services. Additionally, the ongoing train strikes in Lisbon have exacerbated the problem, particularly for workers who depend on these services. The frequent disruptions not only impact commuters' ability to reach their workplaces, but also cause widespread inconvenience for those whose livelihoods are already precarious. He also suggests that privatized investment could play a crucial role in improving the reliability and quality of services, especially in addressing the root causes of the frequent strikes and service disruptions. The current system fails to meet the needs of those who rely on public transportation the most, workers and rural citizens. It's time to consider solutions that balance efficiency with fairness, Bastila writes, advocating for changes that could enhance the quality of life for countless individuals. The urgent need for reform in Portugal's public transportation system is undeniable. With public services that are struggling to meet demand and strikes adding to the frustration, it's crucial for the government to take action to ensure that transportation is both affordable and reliable for all citizens. His call for better management and privatized investment offers a potential pathway to resolving the ongoing issues and creating a more equitable transportation system. Portugal's education system has also faced significant challenges over an elongated period of time, with teacher strikes causing widespread disruption in classrooms. He writes in his letter, "In the past 4 months, teachers have walked out for a staggering 45 days, severely impacting the quality of education and the academic progress of students, highlighting the long-term consequences of such strikes, pointing to the detrimental effects they have on students' future opportunities and overall development." The continuous strikes have not only caused interruptions to the education process, but have also raised alarms about the broader implications for the country's talent pool. Bastila warns that a lack of stability in the education system is leading to a brain drain, as skilled individuals, especially those in the teaching profession, seek more stable opportunities abroad. This exodus of talent threatens Portugal's competitiveness on the global stage and hinders the growth of the next generation of leaders, innovators, and professionals. In addition to addressing the strikes, Bastila also stresses the importance of prioritizing English language education in Portugal's curriculum. As the world becomes increasingly interconnected, he argues that proficiency in English is essential for students to access global opportunities and contribute meaningfully to the international workforce. Along with that, he implores the government to take immediate action to resolve the ongoing strikes and address the underlying concerns of teachers. The future of Portugal depends on its youth, and the education system must be resilient enough to equip them with the skills needed for the global stage, Bastila writes, underscoring the urgency of addressing the education crisis. Only through these efforts can Portugal ensure that its students are prepared for the challenges and opportunities of the future. Portugal is facing a growing housing crisis, exacerbated by a combination of high property taxes and a dominance of foreign buyers in the market. The rising rents and the shortage of affordable housing have left many residents struggling to find stable homes. Portugal's high property taxation, which, while designed to generate revenue, has inadvertently discouraged property owners from renting out their homes. The result has been an alarming number of properties remaining vacant for long periods, further tightening the housing market and driving up rent prices. He writes, high property taxes have become a disincentive for rental properties, which has contributed to the increasing scarcity of affordable housing, particularly for local citizens who are now being priced out of their own neighborhoods. Correspondingly, he points to the growing influence of foreign buyers in Portugal's real estate sector, which he argues has intensified the affordability gap. As foreign investors snap up properties, local residents face escalating rents, leading to social unrest and a widening divide between rich and poor. He proposes regulations that would cap rent increases and ensure that landlords cannot exploit vulnerable tenants. He writes, rent control is not just an economic necessity, but a moral imperative to protect the rights and dignity of local families who are being pushed out of their communities. Additionally, Bastila urges the Portuguese government to implement policies that prevent properties from being left vacant for extended periods. This would allow for more efficient use of available housing and reduce the number of empty homes while addressing the needs of the population, mentioning, the housing crisis requires a decisive response. It is time for the government to intervene and introduce the necessary reforms to stabilize the market and ensure affordable housing for all. He has outlined a comprehensive set of reforms to tackle the country's most pressing issues. His letter to the Portuguese government focuses on a range of topics, from tax reduction in rural areas to healthcare improvements and housing affordability, urging policymakers to implement progressive changes for the benefit of all citizens. He calls for a significant reduction in taxes for rural areas to relieve the financial burden on local communities. As rural regions often struggle with limited access to resources, the tax cuts would enable citizens to manage their finances more effectively and contribute to the sustainability of these areas. Bastila argues, the government must take immediate steps to ease the tax burden on rural populations, ensuring they are not left behind in the economic race. He further advocates for a fair redistribution of government funds to promote rural development. By investing in infrastructure, education, and healthcare in these areas, Bastila believes the government can alleviate regional disparities and stimulate economic growth. Rural development is not just a policy goal, but an essential investment in the future of the country, he writes. He also urges urgent improvements in Portugal's healthcare system. Specifically, he criticizes the inefficiencies and frequent hospital strikes that disrupt essential services. The healthcare system needs to prioritize the needs of citizens and resolve internal issues that lead to strikes and delays in treatment, he stresses. His call for better healthcare access aligns with his broader desire for improved public services. In response to rising costs and financial uncertainty, Bastila insists on government intervention to control inflation and regulate soaring loan interest rates. These measures would protect low-income families from exploitation by financial institutions and ease the strain on citizens' livelihoods. With a clear and actionable vision for change, his advocacy seeks to transform Portugal into a more just and equitable society. His call for reforms, including tax relief, rural development, healthcare improvements, and fair housing policies, presents a roadmap that, if implemented, could dramatically improve the lives of all citizens across the country. Despite the potential risks involved in speaking out against injustices within the system, Bastila remains steadfast in his commitment to effecting positive change. In his letter, he explicitly acknowledges the personal consequences his advocacy may have, noting that his actions could lead to repercussions not only for himself but for his family as well. I am prepared to face any consequences that may arise from my efforts, Bastila writes, highlighting the gravity of his mission. He also expresses his respect for government decisions, acknowledging that his advocacy may not be received with open arms. He understands the possibility of facing backlash, yet he remains resolute in his belief that the long-term benefits of these reforms will ultimately serve the greater good of society. I recognize that the government may not agree with my proposals, and I respect any decision that may arise from it, even if it includes penalizing me, he states, showcasing his commitment to principles over personal gain. In a society where the voices of those advocating for change are often silenced or ignored, his actions stand as a testament to the power of individual advocacy. His willingness to sacrifice personal comfort for the betterment of others underscores his deep-rooted belief in justice and human dignity. While the path he has chosen is fraught with obstacles, he remains unwavering in his pursuit of a better future for the people of Portugal. Keshab Prasad Bastila's work is far from over. His relentless efforts have already sparked change, but the road ahead remains long. His calls for reform continue to resonate, not only in Portugal but across the globe, where Nepalese migrants face similar challenges. He remains committed to advocating for the rights of migrants and the common Portuguese citizens, ensuring that their contributions to society are recognized and that their lives are not defined by fear or exploitation. In his closing words, he sums up his unwavering commitment: I am prepared to speak on this matter in the House of Commons, if necessary, to ensure that these important issues are addressed for the benefit of the citizens. I would also welcome the opportunity to meet with you and any relevant parties in person to clarify my suggestions and discuss the way forward. Through his efforts, the world has seen the true power of resilience, a power that refuses to bow to intimidation and stands firm in the face of adversity. His legacy will forever be intertwined with the transformation of Portugal's treatment of migrants and the betterment of society as a whole.